second Monday Night Football game is the Cleveland Browns at the Pittsburgh Steelers. So we're going to have to go split TVs here. I got 2 TVs side by side. I should be able to make this work.
That's got to be...
Oh, but I'm on the road. I'll be somewhere else.
YouTube TV must surely have a...
They'll do the multi-view on this.
Yeah.
Man, if they could just get 4 and 4 in the multi-view, though, don't get me started. Cleveland Browns at the Steelers. It's 8:15, so there'll be a lot of crossover between these two games. Just get ready to all the fans. Cleveland's favored by 2.5. I just loved it in week 2. The team that maybe was most impressive in week 1, given the expectations, the Cleveland Browns, goes up against the team that maybe was most disappointing based off expectations in the Steelers. It's a division matchup, and you have the Steelers going on the road. I mean, the Browns going on the road to Pittsburgh. What do you make of this one?
Yeah, I mean, this is a really interesting matchup because it's 2 overreaction potential teams from week 1 in the opposite direction, right? Like the Browns looked amazing. How much is that for real? The Steelers looked awful. How much is that for real? Or is this something in the middle that was week 1 weirdness? I'm inclined to absolutely buy into what we saw from that Browns defense. It looked very good, particularly up front. Like, I think how good they are up front is going to make the back end look a lot better, certainly a lot better than last year, and also a lot better than maybe it is this year. Like, we got some pushback on some of the grades of the Browns corners. And look, like is he MJ Emerson now? MJ Emerson was torched for a touchdown, only Joe Burrow missed the field, so it didn't count. Like, it just doesn't. But he's getting downgraded for that, right? There were some downgrades in there for those Browns corners, and they didn't happen because, in large part, the defensive front was getting so much pressure that Burrow was just like heaving the ball up and hoping. So I think that defensive front completely transforms this defense, along with Jim Schwartz maximizing their deployment in terms of moving them around. You know, Zadarius Smith, that's been a feature of his game for years. That's still a thing here. Myles Garrett is being moved around as well. Now you don't know when anybody's lining up or where or how the hell to stop them. So the Browns defense, I feel, could be absolutely for real. But I think there's a lot of pressure now on this Pittsburgh offense to say, we looked great in preseason. Everybody thinks our offensive coordinator is terrible. We need to fix this now, going up against a very good defense. There's a lot of pressure on them going into this week, I think.
I'm with you on the Browns. Also, Myles Garrett moving around and just creating havoc up front. And the Steelers were beat up, man. We talked about all the Niners' great defensive line grades that came against the Steelers last week. I thought Kenny Pickett played a poor game overall. The play calling, we talk about the play calling again, and JT's got some funny quips about the play calling. Dan O is upset about the play calling. Nobody's been excited about Matt Canada in Pittsburgh. That was the thing we ignored coming out of the preseason with all the hype. And we mentioned it at least, but maybe Kenny Pickett can overcome it. Matt Canada doesn't put them in great position to succeed. Now Deontay Johnson's hurt as well, so they're a little bit thinner. I like the depth that they've built, but they're a little thinner. You got to go back to George Pickens, let him be special. Use those tight ends, and I think Pittsburgh will play better this week. But man, I don't know if the Browns, dominate up front once again. I wouldn't be surprised. I like the way that Browns defense is looking. They were physical on the outside, and I think they're going to make it challenging for Pittsburgh. Cleveland's offense was just okay. Nick Chubb's still really good, and I think he'll have his success.
One of the most intriguing one-on-one matchups of the week. DeJuan Jones, newly installed starting right tackle, gargantuan human being, now gets to test. Okay, we've mentioned a lot of times there's a lot of reps where DeJuan Jones wins ugly, or he's in or loses, but in an acceptable level of tolerance. You're losing on this rep, but you're so big, strong, and huge that it's just about enough for us to work. That dude gets a baptism of fire against TJ Watt in week 2. That's going to be fascinating to watch.
And DeJuan Jones, his strength has been pass blocking.
Yes.
Has not been the run game for various reasons, assignments and quickness and the whole thing. But it's been pass blocking because recovery length, and he's tough to get around. But TJ Watt can bend the edge. He can get around. So this could be another 2-sack performance. Now, we kind of predicted a 2 or 3 sack performance for TJ Watt last week. It didn't matter.
Right.
But yeah, it's an awesome matchup to keep an eye on.
But it's also, I'm going to be so interested to see how many snaps DeJuan Jones has where he's in trouble but gets away with it, because that could happen. Like, he could be in trouble basically every snap against TJ Watt. Watt is that good, But he might also survive most of them simply by the size, strength, arm length, you know, all that kind of wingspan, all of that stuff. Like there were preseason plays where he had issues, but you stick one paw out, you get it on his shoulder. Now you've just extended the gap that he has to go by 2 yards. And that can be the difference between the ball coming out or not. So just a fascinating matchup here to see. DeJuan Jones has looked pretty good, I think. He's looked absolutely like a viable starting right tackle, but he's going up against a Defensive Player of the Year candidate right from the get-go. And we talked last week about how, look, Orlando Brown couldn't deal with Myles Garrett, a Defensive Player of the Year type of candidate. Like, Defensive Player of the Year candidates beat up on average to good tackles, and that's what he's dealing with right out of the gate.
So there's a lot on paper to like about the Browns. I remember there's been other times in the last couple of years where the Steelers have been embarrassed. Was it last year against the Bills? I mean, Josh Allen had like 200 yards in the first quarter and a couple 60-yard touchdowns. Mike Tomlin's, he's righted the ship before, right? He's gotten them back. So I don't want to overrate that from Pittsburgh, even though I was down on him in week 1. I think they'll cover as home dogs here. How about that? I'm going to buy into Mike Tomlin getting them back on track here.
I'm buying that Browns defense a bit. I'm not yet ready to write off what I thought about Pittsburgh heading into the season, but if they stink the way they stank in week 1 again against the Browns, even though the Browns is a good defense, I think the drag factor on the scheme is too much to overcome. We're
also, like, last week, it was the last week of the season last year, Deshaun Watson sacked 7 times by Pittsburgh. Like, he's got his own problems here. The Watson mediocre performance continued.
Yeah.
And we're not talking about it because the Browns defense is so good. It's going to be a factor.
Right. But they got a few more plays out of him than they did last season. And
they did.
And it was a rain game, so you throw it out.